talk a lot in our church about encountering walls in our lives. Walls are spiritual obstacles that we must overcome in order to grow deeper with God. And I believe that Mephibosheth has been stuck at the same wall for most of his life. He is at a spiritual and emotional place where he cannot grow or change. He is in low debar. He is untouchable, unreachable, and unavailable for the kindness of anyone else around him. And before we go on today, let me just ask you, are you stuck in a place where there's no growth or pasture? Could you describe your spiritual life as a green pasture or dry wasteland? My plan for the message today was to give you some specific ways that you can show kindness and generosity to others using the example of David in 2 Samuel 9. Now, many of you have been trying to show kindness. You're kind of you said, okay, Pastor, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try to be kind for 30 days. I'm going to pick that one person, and I'm not going to criticize them, and I'm going to show kindness and generosity for 30 days. And to be honest, it's killing me, right? I'm trying, or maybe you've already given up. Maybe you said, hey, I tried this thing, I did it once, and they just didn't respond. I mean, what's the deal? I showed them kindness. They didn't even say thank you, So I'm done with that kindness thing. Let me just say, kindness stuff or any of this creative things that we're talking about, maybe it just doesn't seem to be you. Perhaps you just don't know what to do. And I'm going to give you some answers from God's Word today on where to begin on how to show kindness. Some specific ways that you can begin thinking and doing just to be kind to someone else. But before I do, I think today's passage brings to light another issue we need to talk about. Some people are just more difficult to love. Right? Some people are just more difficult. Some of us are more difficult to show kindness or compassion to. Some of us reject the kindness of others without even knowing it. You know someone who's hard to love? Someone in your family? Someone at school? Someone on your job? It's that person that gets under your skin, and you've tried to love them. You've tried to be kind to them, but whatever you do, they just get on your last nerve, right? Are you a person who is hard to love? We encounter this guy with a really long name in the Bible, Mephibosheth. But in Mephibosheth, we find him in 2 Samuel 9. He's the grandson of King Saul, the first king of Israel. Now, we first learn of Mephibosheth in 2 Samuel 4:4, and you would think he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, with everything handed to him, but he's described as a victim from the first moment we meet him. When the word reached their household, when he was a baby, when the word reached the household that both King Saul and his son Jonathan were both killed in battle, the family fled in fear. Now, it was common in those days, in biblical days, if a new king came to power, the new king usually wiped out the family of the old king, so later nobody could claim the throne or try to get in rebellion and get that throne again. So they usually wiped out the old family. That was common in those days. As Saul and Jonathan's family flee, the nurse accidentally drops the baby, and the child is lame for life. That child is Mephibosheth. Just said it. Third time. Now, there's actually a little controversy in Mephibosheth's name. In 1 Chronicles 8:34 and in 9:40, he's called by another name in some other parts of the Bible. And I asked myself why. The name he is called is actually Merib Baal. Now, Baal is the name of a pagan god, and Merib Baal basically means the hero of Baal. And as the Israelite scribes were writing the story in the scriptures, the name was so offensive that they most likely changed his name in the story that we're reading today to Mephibosheth, which actually means from the mouth of shame. So the grandson of King Saul is either a trophy of a pagan god or he's born out of the mouth of shame. Great way to start your life, right? And we see the shame in how Mephibosheth is introduced in 2 Samuel 9:3. The king said, "Is there not still someone in the house of Saul, that I might show the kindness of God to him?" And Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He's crippled in both his feet." Or he's crippled in his feet. That's the first thing out of the Ziba's mouth. He didn't say, he's the son of him. He does this, this, and this. Oh, and by the way, no. His distinction is that he is crippled or lame at this moment. I don't know if most of you probably did not, but if you grew up in a small town, or even here in Rayon City, as I've gotten to know the community over the years, there's always people known, and some people are just known for their bad stuff that's happened to them. Oh, that guy was hit by a car, or that guy was born with 11 toes. Whatever it is, that's what they're known for, and anytime you see them, no matter how many years has passed, oh, that's the guy that did that, or that's the guy that got out of jail, or that's the guy... Do you know what I'm talking about? This is Mephibosheth. He is known for being crippled in his feet. Now later at the end of the chapter, when he's redeemed by David, the author notes that Mephibosheth is lame. Now some don't reflect this, but in most translations they use different words because in the Hebrew it's different. The word crippled here is more than a physical description. Mephibosheth is afflicted. He is cursed. There is a black cloud over this guy's head. When you see that guy, you remember it from the... he doesn't even have to be moving. He can be in a car, whatever. Well, they don't have cars back then, but he can be in whatever, and it's still, it's that guy. That's Mephibosheth here. His affliction is more than physical. That's why Mephibosheth calls himself, in verse 8, a dead dog. It's one of my favorite scripture verses. He calls himself a dead dog. Now, we even notice his affliction where he's living. Scriptures say that he is known to live in a place called Lo Debar. Lo Debar means no pasture. Nothing grows there. The grandson of the king is a crippled, dead dog sleeping on somebody else's couch in a place of abandonment. Everything in his life says, no trespassing, leave me alone, you are not welcome here. We talk a lot in our church about encountering walls in our lives. Walls are spiritual obstacles that we must overcome in order to grow deeper with God. And I believe that Mephibosheth has been stuck at the same wall for most of his life. He is at a spiritual and emotional place where he cannot grow or change. He is in Lo Debar. He is untouchable, unreachable, and unavailable for the kindness of anyone else around him. And before we go on today, let me just ask you, are you stuck in a place where there's no growth or pasture? Could you describe your spiritual life as a green pasture or a dry wasteland? Has a painful experience from your past made you more resistant to the kindness of God or others? Well, let me ask it this way. Do you naturally think the best or the worst in others? As soon as you hear a story, do you think, or someone's name, do you automatically think of the best or the worst possibilities? Is there a habit or attitude that you have that you really tell others that you're untouchable, your kindness is not welcome here? And the good news is this. The kindness of God can reach the deadest dog, okay? The kindness of God can reach the deadest dog in this room today. When we offer our best to others, God can transform even the most resistant. Our best does not necessarily mean the biggest or the most expensive, and sometimes our best is our understanding or listening ear. But in the hands of God, my best is multiplied in amazing ways to other people. From 2 Samuel 9, I want to give you some practical ways you can be generous so that others can experience the kindness of God. I'm only going to show you 4 today, but there's about 8 or 9 that I wanted to. It's all on our notes. It's all on our app. And you can go all the way down to the bottom and read more ways that you can put kindness into practice, especially through generosity. But number 1, the best generosity is intentional and not accidental. Now, believe it or not, most of us are not accidentally kind. Okay? Most of you don't stumble into being kind to other people. Most of us are actually naturally kind of rude and offensive to other people, to be honest with you, right? It doesn't come natural for us, and it's not just accidental. We must be intentional. If this challenge has taught us anything, it's that we must be thoughtful and intentional about our kindness towards others. Has God already done that with you? Those of you who are participating, has God rubbed you, has something rubbed you the wrong way, or you've realized maybe that you're not as kind as you thought you were, or maybe there's a greater way that you can share kindness with someone that you never realized before? And some of you didn't even try the challenge because you were afraid that you wouldn't know what to do or that you wouldn't be very good at it. But the key to begin is intentionality. Begin by trying to be generous and to think about the needs of the other person. David has no idea who Mephibosheth was or what needs he might have. He just begins with a great motive. And the king said in verse 3, "Is there not still someone in the house of Saul that I might show the kindness of God to him?" That's a great place to begin. Ask God today or tomorrow when you wake up, "God, is there somebody I can show kindness to today? Is there someone I can show the kindness," as David puts it, the kindness of God to someone today? The best generosity is intentional. It's not accidental. It's not about having great 5 or 30 wonderful creative ways to show love or kindness to someone else. It's about the intentionality of your heart, saying, "Listen, I don't know how, but God, I'm waking up today. Help me to show kindness at school to somebody. Help me to have a vision at my job this week to see someone in need. Help me to show the kindness of God to someone." Number 2, the best generosity is distinct and not mutual. You will never see the transformational power of God's kindness if you're waiting for somebody else to be kind to you first. Hey, I'll be kind to that person if they show me something first, right? If they really do it, if they really show me something, hey, I'll give it back. It's no big deal. But listen, I know this person. This is a repeating theme in my life with this guy or this girl. I know who they are. I know what they're about. And if they'll show me something, I'll give something in return. Guys, there's something so pure and so powerful about being generous to someone, not expecting anything in return. There is something, if you've never experienced, some of you have, if God has placed something in your heart and you said, "I'm going to give something," or "I'm going to help this person out," and I don't know why, but God is putting that on my heart and I'm going to do it, and I know I'm not going to get anything in return, but I'm going to do it anyway. There's something powerful and pure about that. And once again, notice how Mephibosheth is introduced to David in verse 3. And the king said, "Is there not still someone in the house of Saul that I might show the kindness of God to him?" And Ziba said to the king, "There is still the son of Jonathan, but he's crippled in his feet." Now there's speculation that Ziba described Mephibosheth this way to let David know that he'd never be a threat to his throne. Now, I'm convinced that Ziba described him this way to let David know that Mephibosheth was really not worth his time. Hey, Mephibosheth, this guy, you're looking for the guy. This guy really can't give you anything back. He'll never be captain of the guard. He'll never be the manager or the administrator of your finances in the palace. He can't really offer anything. He's crippled in both of his feet, so you might as well look for somebody else. I also speculate, there's no evidence of this at all, but I also speculate that the nurse that originally dropped him was a part of Ziba's family, so he didn't want David to have anything to do with him because it brought up some pain from himself, that his family was responsible perhaps for it in the first place. So in other words, why bless Mephibosheth if he can't contribute anything in return? And David's response is amazing in verse 7. He goes to lengths to track down Mephibosheth, and when he finds him, he says, "And David said to him, 'Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always.'" Remember that Mephibosheth was living in a home that was not his own, in a place that didn't grow anything. And what does David provide? He provides his own land, his own home, and his own food. Generosity with nothing expected in return. The best generosity is distinct. It's not mutual. Number 3. The best generosity is presence, not presence. It's presence and not presence. I'm not saying the same word twice. You can look. It's presence and not gifts or presents. Now, the moment we talk about generosity, how many of you were thinking about money? Come on. No one else was thinking. As soon as I said the word generosity, how many of you were thinking first and foremost about money? Cha-ching, dinero, right? Yeah, most of us in this room, when we think about that word, and you got to get that out of your vocabulary, because obviously David gave generously. He gave land and wealth to Mephibosheth, but look carefully at the best gift that David gave. Verse 11 says, Then Ziba said to the king, According to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so will your servant do. So Mephibosheth, it's probably my favorite line, beside the dead dog line. This is my favorite line in the scripture. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. If you think David's best gift was money and land, you're missing the point of the story. The best act of generosity in the story were not the presents that David gave, but the presents of family that Mephibosheth received. When we started this chapter, Mephibosheth was a crippled, dead dog, and now he lives in the palace. He eats like one of David's sons. He has access to the king. His opinion matters. Someone is finally listening. Of all the generosity in this text, what do you think meant more to Mephibosheth? Now, you can be generous and spend nothing. Give someone your time and your heart. The best generosity is presence, not presence. And number 4, the best generosity is planted, not purchased. Now, there's not evidence to prove this, but most likely Mephibosheth had never owned anything in his life. People with a handicap in those days were not allowed to work, and Mephibosheth had spent most of his time in life in hiding. He probably never owned a goat in his life, and now he owns expansive land with crops and herds of animals. What is going on here? I was thinking about this earlier. It's like if you only owned a bike and I gave you a Cadillac and you had no idea how to drive a car or how to put money, how to put gas in it. Nothing you knew how to do. It's an extravagant gift for someone who has no idea what to do with it. Right? I've shared the story before, but quite famously in our time in our mission work in Guatemala, one of the families that was known over the years was the family of Olivia. She has 9 kids, and one of the kids was born blind. All right. When we first encountered them years and years ago, they lived in a 1-room house with no running water. I don't know how they survived. It was usually banana and a tortilla a day was what most of those kids ate on. And I remember in the early days of our ministry there, we had an American team that came, and their hearts just broke when they saw Olivia and her family and the devastating poverty that they were in. And some well-meaning American opened up their pocketbook or their checkbook, and they gave $100 to Olivia. That $100 was like gold, you guys. That was more money than she probably had ever seen at one time. And the American team left, and she immediately went to the store, and she bought $100 worth of meat. She had no stove, and she had no refrigerator. And she had $100 worth of meat. That $100 probably would have provided for her family for 6 months. But they wasted it on $100 worth of meat for a couple of meals. Her poverty was more than financial. It was a mentality. She didn't know what to do with the blessings that she had, and that's what makes this story so unique. David, who is respectful of the situation, he provides a solution. Verses 9 and 10 say the following: Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, All that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him, and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. You can begin to do the math. Mephibosheth goes from living alone in Lodebar to supervising Ziba with a workforce of 35, not counting their wives and children. Also notice that while Mephibosheth will gain the profits from his own land, he will always eat and live rent-free in the palace. Now that's a deal. Second only to the goodness of eating at the king's table, like one of David's sons. David invests in the long-term stability of Mephibosheth. David plants, or he invests in his long-term success rather than a momentary gift. And as God's people, we need to have an investment mentality. Now, I'm not going to talk bad about you guys today, okay? I love you all. I'm here to encourage you. But it's interesting to me how many of our people will come to the church or come in a crisis, like, for example, a financial crisis, that something has happened, and an emergency has happened, and you just need the church to help out. Yet, when we offer a class on how to budget your money better and how to save for the future, nobody shows up. Unless it's just Mark. Maybe it's you. Should have gotten a better teacher. Right? We've got to have an investment mentality. We talk to people all the time about the importance of our young people and our children, and then we go to adult classes and say, hey, we need you guys to come to invest in our young people. And you're like, well, I really enjoy my time. It's me time. I come to church for me. It's my time to grow in the Lord. It's my time. It's all for me. It's really not to invest in the lives of other people around me. I was noticing this week how many of Jesus' parables in the New Testament were about growing, planting, harvesting, reaping. Go back and look. What does it say about our Christianity if it's always about us and I'm never investing in the lives of those around me? So let me just ask the question today. Who in your life are you investing in? Who are you sharing and planting the gospel in? And if you're not, and let me say, don't tell me I'm just a baby Christian. I've only been a Christian. No. We see guys in the New Testament who receive Christ, and in 2 hours they're out. They're being missionaries to their communities after just meeting Jesus. Don't tell me you've got to be an expert in the Bible before you invest in the lives of others. Guys, it's time. What does it say about our faith and about our Christianity, once again, if I never invest in someone else around me, and it's always about what I can receive? As God's people, we must have a planting, investing mentality. Do you think David's investment had a long-term impact in the life of Mephibosheth? Did it? Or was it just kind of a nice gift for him? Do you think that long-term investment mattered? Listen to verses 12 and 13. And Mephibosheth had a young son. I hope you hear this. Had a young son whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. And by the way, he was lame in both his feet. It's a very different man than in the first verses that we encounter him. He now has a son, which means he has a wife and a family. Ziba's family is growing as well, his servant. So you can see the multiplication of Mephibosheth's employees. The company is expanding. Things are going so well that Mephibosheth is able to stay in Jerusalem. He doesn't even manage his stuff anymore. He stays in Jerusalem to enjoy the presence of his gran familia, his big family. And the writer now mentions he's lame. Doesn't have the power that the first description had. Before it said he's crippled. That's the first thing we know about him. And now it says Mephibosheth has this, he has a son, he has a family, everything is growing, and oh, by the way, he's lame. When we first meet him, his physical disability defines who he is. Now it's the last description on the list. This is the power of investment and kindness. Guys, the best generosity is planted and not purchased. About 2 months ago, we celebrated with my families in Guatemala because the oldest son of Olivia, the lady that bought $100 worth of meat, just graduated from the university. His younger brother is now serving in a ministry in another part of the country. And when the last time I was traveling in Guatemala, I was leaving the airport and I was looking for something to eat. And someone out of the blue said, "Hey," and I looked over and it was the youngest child of Olivia working in the airport. And I just walked away from that moment going, "God, thank you." I remember when they had one banana and a couple tortillas to eat in a one-room shack in paradise in Guatemala. And now look at what you've done because of the investment of the church and of the ministry and people who look beyond their present to see the possibilities of their future, all through generosity and kindness. The best kind of generosity, it's planted, it's not purchased. How is God calling you to be generous to those around you who you claim to love? What excuses have you made for not giving others your best? What pretext have you always come up with for not giving others the best of who you are? Someone is waiting to experience the kindness of God through your generosity of time and care and resources. What are you waiting on? And one final word today for those who are resistant to kindness. You're one of those people who are hard to love. Open your heart to God and to others today. Look for the best in those around you and ask God to show you